So thank you all very much for coming, as I've already said, but I think there might be some people who are here for the first time this evening who have not met me before and who are probably wondering, well, what on earth can a Buddhist nun tell us about work? Did you think like that? Because people think Buddhist nuns, they think all they do is meditate all day. They don't have to work. They don't have to worry about doing anything or stress or timetables or anything like that. They have a very cushy life. Did you think that? Oh, you know better. Oh, I tell you, the number of people that have expected me to be, ready for them on tap because they think that all you're doing is just sitting there all day waiting for them. But although I've been a nun for more than 20 years, I haven't always been a nun. And although I don't have a relationship, because as a nun that's not what you do, I don't have my own family, I still have relatives, I still have friends, I still have work colleagues in a Buddhist centre that I need to interact with and try and be nice. You have to try and be nice, don't you? So although my life is a little bit different than yours, I still have some awareness of the pressures of living a modern life. And those of you who are here on Tuesday might remember that I also said that until I went to live in the Netherlands 12 years ago, I also was working, even though I was a nun, but I was working, and I was working in different companies, including for Arnott's Biscuits and Campbell's Soup Company. Fast-moving consumer goods, which means that there's a lot of it's a high volume business, and I was what they called the strategic sourcing manager. I love the titles, but so I've had some experience with working. I have experience even now working, and working and sort of that kind of interacting with others and being able to either produce something or contribute in some way, as well as Buddhism. These are two aspects that are so important in my life. They're so they permeate. They go right through my whole life. So as I say, I was working for years as a nun. They didn't know I was a nun, but I knew I was a nun. Okay? I knew I was Buddhist. So although I was going to work and wearing the business suits, because we had to do that in those days, wearing the business suits and having to display the professionalism and, having to play the game in a way, isn't it? Having to play the game. I also had, and I had the label. I was labelled strategic sourcing manager, but I also had this other identity, nun, So, quite interesting trying to integrate these two roles. I think it was fantastic. It doesn't normally happen. Many nuns and monks, the majority actually, they become ordained and then they go and live in a monastery or a nunnery, or they live in a Buddhist centre and they have other people around them supporting them. Me, for some reason, we could call it karma, the relationship between causes and results. For some reason, I ended up as being a nun, but needing to work in order to support myself. So, I had to try and find a way that I could make all of this work together. And so if we just forget the nun label for a moment, those who are following a spiritual path who are following maybe a Buddhist path, who are also working. And as I said, when I say working, I don't mean only working for a company. Okay, it can be voluntary work, it can be working with a family or something like that. You know, those who are trying to find a spiritual path and who are working need to do the same kind of thing that I did, was to try and integrate and try and find a balance. So even the last 12 years where I've been in Holland, and it's been, you know, that my, how can I say it, my main focus has been on being a Buddhist nun. Even there, it's been a lot of work. You can say teacher, okay, that's not working necessarily, but I was the director of the centre, I had all these board meetings, financial planning, building projects, managing staff, planning events. You know, there's a whole aspect. It's not just sitting on a nice cushion all day and, you know, being all love and light. You know? So, as I say, this topic for me is really fantastic because I want to talk about these two main aspects of my life. That I think we need to be able to find the balance, we need to be able to integrate in order to be sane, okay? In order to be complete, you know, balanced human beings. And being able to make a contribution with our lives. So it's really about trying to integrate a sense of spirituality in order to find this balance that bridges the work kind of personal life divide. They often talk about that, don't they? And that many people who are following a spiritual path, they come to me and say, how can I find this balance? Do you find this also an issue, anyone? Trying to get this business, this personal life and this working life, you know? So, in order to be able to do that, I think, in order to be able to be successful in our life, you know, to be balanced, to be happy, I keep using this word sane. You know what I mean by sane? Just kind of normal. There's a Dutch term, and it says "doe normaal." It's like be normal. But in order to be sane, in order to be balanced, in order to be successful, in order to be happy, then we need to work really effectively with our minds. We need to be able to identify opportunities. We need to make the most of our intelligence and our strength. We need to learn how to interact effectively with others, not just with our work colleagues, but with our families, with our community, with our environment. You've got to be able to use your intelligence and be able to sort of integrate and function well with all of these elements that are around you. You're not an isolated something, you know. We are not totally self-sufficient and totally independent. We need others. And so in order to be successful, then we need to know how to successfully, effectively integrate, you know, with others. So we need to know how to manage ourselves. We need to be aware of ourselves. We need to be able to ensure that whatever work it is that we do, whether it's paid, whether it's voluntarily, whether it's for a company, whether it's for a voluntary organisation, that all of these activities are meaningful. That it's not just something to pass your time or to consume your life. We need to work out how can we make every single activity beneficial and meaningful, you know, a source of happiness for us and for well-being, rather than it actually becoming a problem. rather than it being a source of dissatisfaction, rather than it becoming a source of stress, even burnout. So that's what I'd like to look at tonight, the role of work, and to see how integrating Buddhism can help us, get some more meaning out of our work, can use the work activities in terms of bringing about greater happiness and lessening the problems and suffering, not only for ourselves but also for others. Now, I think some people work in a company, some people don't. Some people are called manager, some people aren't. Title's not so important, because whatever work we do, we need to know how to manage. Doesn't matter if we're called manager or not, we need to know how to manage. And I was once talking to a group of people, and I said, what are the qualities that a manager needs? Let me ask you. What qualities do you think a good manager needs? Thick skin. Do you know what this other group answered? Male. Oh! They need to be thick-skinned. Absolutely right. Anything else? Patient. A good listener. A leader. Do we have any advances on leader?
The ability to see the bigger picture.
Good. A good perspective. I think they also need to be a mentor, in a way. They need to be able to coach others, to work effectively with others, be able to look for the good in others and try to enhance the good, to draw out the qualities in others. Okay? I think that, yes, they need to be a leader. They need to be also have some sense of inspiration, that they can also inspire others. What else? They need to be able to manage their time, don't they? They have to have time management skills. I've once heard that a good manager walks around a lot. Which basically means that they don't just sit behind their desk in some ivory tower, but they engage, they get involved, they take responsibility. So actually this list of what a good manager should be or could be goes on and on and on. But it's really quite interesting when we think about these kind of qualities from a good manager, because they're the same kind of qualities that we need personally in order to develop, in order to be happy, in order to be able to overcome problems, in order to develop. We need to be able to inspire ourselves, don't we? We need to be able to manage our time. We need to be able to lead ourselves in a good, safe direction. We need to be able to identify our qualities and draw them out. It's the same, isn't it? And it's very interesting that most people do not have these leadership, these managerial abilities naturally. They're a skill that they need to learn. So that's the same with us. We have to learn the skills. We have to learn the behaviour. We have to learn how to be able to communicate effectively with others. And let's face it, we communicate with others at so many different levels. There are those that are above us, maybe our bosses. There are those who are our colleagues, there are those who we might have to inspire and guide and lead. Then there are families and children and friends. We have to learn how to effectively communicate with all of these different people. And one size doesn't fit all, does it? Have you noticed if you tried to talk to somebody like you talk to your child, they wouldn't be very happy, would they? So you have to learn the skills. And these days, so many courses. Do people go to bookshops anymore? Still go to bookshops, okay. Because I was reading that everybody's doing these e-books and stuff like that now, and so the bookshops are not doing very well. But if you go into any bookshop, you're going to find a section, aren't you? Management and self-help. I've only been into one bookshop in Sydney in the last so many years, but it was there. It was definitely there. So there are rows and rows of books of how to manage, how to develop the self. And they talk about, how you should dress, for example. Dress for success. It's true? I'm not making this up? Good. Okay, dress for success. They talk about the way you should behave, your body language. Your body language for success. When you go in and you meet somebody, you shake the hand. Don't they say something like this? And that your handshake should be firm? Yeah, okay. They talk about the way you dress. You should dress for success. And our society is going on about this now, aren't they? Do you have all these makeover programs here? About how the hair should be and the makeup should be if you're a woman. And also with a man these days, there's got to be more makeup, hasn't there? And the facelifts. And also, you've got to train your body so that you've got muscles and you're thin and, and taut, and the kind of clothes that you have to wear. This whole prescription about how to be successful, about how to become the effective manager, to become a successful person. All of these prescriptions. And if you followed exactly what they wrote in all the books, my goodness me, what a bland world we have. Oh. They're mostly directed at somebody's ideal, kind of a fantasy ideal about how you should be, how you need to create yourself, recreate yourself into this certain persona. They're offering a prescription, and a prescription in these days and times of how to be able to keep your job. Because I think these days, maybe it's different in Australia, I don't know nowadays, but it's a bit cutthroat. Is it like that here? Yeah? And you've got to survive. And you've really got to play the game to be able to survive. And it's really quite insecure. In Australia, in Holland, it's very difficult to lose your job. Very difficult. They have to take you to court. They have to kind of prove that you're not up to doing your job. And usually they have to pay you out for at least a year's salary, but often with retraining and everything. Do you want to move to Holland? Yeah, it's very, very difficult to lose your job. So, but in Australia, I think that we've probably all had some personal experience, or we know somebody who has lost their job or has been made redundant. I was telling Lindy the other day, one job I was working as a nun, just after I became ordained actually, and they accused me of having 2 jobs because I was a nun as well. They accused me of having 2 jobs, because they found out about it. I don't think you should have to tell your employer what your religion is, or your sexuality or anything like that. But anyway, they used it as an excuse. Fine. I was made redundant from another job. Oh gosh, doesn't that hurt? I mean, your whole self-identity is rolled up with your position and your job and who you work for, and all of a sudden it's just pulled out from underneath your feet, you know? So I think all of us have had some kind of experience or know someone, and in these insecure times where we need to work in order to be able to survive, we are pretty much forced into playing the game, or to try and find out, you know, how to behave in order to get the job and to keep the job. So that's why I think these kind of books, management books, self-help books, these self-help courses, I think this is why they're all so successful these days. They're so popular. So a lot of the management techniques that we read about, that we learn about, they're really aimed at helping you to do the right thing so that you can keep your job, whether you agree with it or not. This is what you need to learn to do. So we learn those lessons. We learn to become professional. We wear the business suits. As I said, before I went to Holland, I was working for Arnott's. Does anyone work for Arnott's here? They were one of the best companies I've ever worked for, I have to tell you. Very, very good company. Anyway, so I was in this management position. So every morning I'd have to get dressed to go to work. I can remember it so clearly. I didn't wear high heel shoes, because as a nun you don't wear high heel shoes, but I had little heels, you know. Then there was the business suit. What colour do you reckon the business suit would be? Had to be black. Could get away with grey in the summer, but it was black or grey. Have you ever been on these? I used to fly from Sydney to Melbourne a lot, you know, on the 6 o'clock flight out of Sydney in the morning, and it was full of suits. Full of suits. So there was the business suit, and yes, it had to be black, or if you were lucky in the summer you could get away with grey. Then you might have a nice blouse, you know. So I put on this professional manager image, and then I'd come home at the end of the day, throw all of that off, put on my robes, ta-da! And then I was the nun, you know? And in the beginning, not just with this job at Arnott's, but right at the beginning when I was first a nun, I felt like I had a multiple personality disorder. You know? Do you remember that TV show with, was it Toni Collette? The United something of Tara. And she, I mean, it was a serious problem, of course. I don't want to make a joke about a serious problem. But she had these multiple personalities. One moment she was the housewife, the perfect housewife, making the perfect, it was American, cookies. We call them biscuits, don't we? Okay, making the cookies and looking after the kids at school. And next thing, she would turn around into this very kind of, this bloke, didn't she? That was drinking a lot and shooting guns and stuff like that and swearing. And then she'd turn around into a teenager. Yeah, I think I only saw it once or twice.
I think she had 4 or 5 different personalities.
Yeah. So, here was me. I could feel, at first, I felt there was such a separation that it was like I was this person and then I was that person. And I can remember driving to work and looking in the rearview mirror and thinking, where's the nun? You know, where's the nun? And then coming home and putting the robes on and saying, where's the manager? You know, where is it? Where is something so concrete that you can hold on to? So that's what you do when you take on roles. When you're in a work situation, you take on a role. You take on a sort of a persona, don't you? You learn how to be a manager. You learn how to do your job, how to be professional, how to be the if you're not in a company, how to be the mother, how to be the father, you know, how to be the nun. You learn how to dress, what to wear, how to behave, and you, in the process, cover up a lot about yourself. Who you are. You cover your natural self, almost with a layer and with another suit, a suit of armour. You know, the manager, the worker, the partner, the nun. You have this kind of code of appearance, code of behaviour. And it's almost like we button up our mind. And because what we're trying to do is to be somebody or something, we cover up our own personality. And that ends up am I telling the truth here?
I'm just glad it's not only me that does this.
Okay, no, I'm talking from experience. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is my experience. All right. So maybe I'm generalising too much, but you know, there seems to be such a gap between, you know, who you think you should be, and how you should behave, and how you actually feel. There's such a gap. And it's really quite frustrating, and you start to lose touch. And what we also do is, with these kind of personas and the skills that we develop to support these ideas of who we are, who we should be, then we also try to manipulate the environment around us and the people that surround us. We try to manipulate everything into what we want, what we think will fit with this idea, with this kind of personality, with this idea. You know, to feed what we desire, or what we think we desire. And when we don't get, if that doesn't work, we don't get what we want, we don't get what we desire, then what happens? We suffer. We get frustrated, we get disappointed, we get angry, but then we hide those feelings. We push them down, we suppress them. Because it's not professional to display those feelings, is it? And if you do, then you won't have your job very long. So we try to suffocate these feelings of, I think there's a psychological term, dissonance, cognitive dissonance or something, you know. So we try to suffocate these feelings, we try to forget them, we try to ignore what's really going on inside, how we actually feel. So that's why a lot of these suits on the flight coming back from Melbourne late in the afternoon, sorry, that was really Australian, wasn't it? Wasn't that nice? Kind of, you know, into the alcohol.
It's accurate though.
Sorry?
It's accurate.
It's accurate. And so, you know, what happens is that people don't actually end up feeling happy in their jobs. You know, we don't feel that happy with our work. It becomes actually a source of stress. But we're in the whole game. We're playing the whole game. We're too scared to do something different. And it's just it just takes us all over. So the result is, you know, of not being happy, of suppressing or suffocating the way we feel in order to keep up the image, the happy professional image, you know, we put up such a thick wall between our projected self and our personal self. And as a result of this, we end up feeling stressed. And that plays a toll on us. We age prematurely. Why do you think I've got all these grey hairs? You know? We age prematurely, we become physically ill, we get high blood pressure and heart attacks, all these kind of things, you know. People have burnout. Burnout is really a big thing in Holland. Is it a thing here? Do many people burn out? Okay. We're not really, because we become so stressed, we become ill, because we start to burn out, we're not able to fully experience the fruit of all of the work that we put in. We're not really able to enjoy what we've been working for. It places such a strain on your relationship. In fact, many relationships break down because of this. We spend so much time trying to be like the professional worker, you know, suppressing or suffocating our feelings so that our emotions don't get in the way of our work. And then when we have a situation, a personal crisis, like an illness ourselves, or the illness of someone close to us, or someone dying, or if we've got children, the children being teenagers, getting into all kinds of things, you know, then, you know, relationship not working so well, maybe divorce or something like that, you know, because we've been alienating ourselves from our feelings for so long, we don't know how to really behave anymore. We don't know what to do, because so much time, so much energy and ambition has been spent on developing the professional self. And, you know, okay, we might not be professionals in the sense of the word professional, but, you know, this kind of working, or this idea of what we should do. You know, we've been spent so much time and energy in trying to get all the trappings, you know, to get the money, to get the house, the car. I guess you have to have swimming pools here too, don't you? Probably have to have 2 cars, don't you? I don't know where else you want to have here. Holidays, overseas trips, you know. Okay, so much time, so much effort has gone into all of that the whole spiritual and emotional development of yourself suffers. And as a result, we end up distancing ourselves from those that previously we'd been close to, people that are important to us. You know, maybe our parents, maybe, you know, loved ones. We don't have the time. You know? I'm sure we've all heard of such situations. We've seen it on TV. I'm sure we've all heard of someone that's put so much effort into their career that they've ended up losing their whole relationship as a result. You know, they've lost the ability to be able to empathise with others, to be able to communicate. They've lost touch with their original core values. You know, maybe the dreams that they previously had, you know, the people that were close to them, they've lost touch with reality. And I think that's, you know, a big, big danger. I know someone that this happened to. And this guy worked for a big multinational company. And he was on a fast track with his career. And so he was working very, very hard, and the company would send him to work overseas, so he'd have to take the whole family and the children overseas. And he would be working very, very hard there, very long hours. The family were just pretty much left to, you know, their own devices. But he kind of also started to get, well, I can do even better. I could work for an even better company with an even better position. And so he then went and got a new job, and probably actually he wasn't really ready to take on that much greater responsibility. But as a result of doing that, he had young children, and he really became so alienated from his family, you know, and his way of behaving also with this new job just created so much of a gap. And, you know, very interesting and lucky for him and his family was that finally one day he recognised what was happening, you know, what was going on. And he thought to himself, what am I doing? The whole reason that I started on this work and career trajectory was to be able to support my family, you know, to give them the kind of lifestyle and, you know, for everyone to be happy. And basically I'm in Australia, there's a word that begins with F and ends with G, you know. He was making a mess of it all. And so luckily he recognised that there was this imbalance. And luckily there are some companies also that recognise this imbalance between professional and personal life. And that's why there's also a lot of these self-improvement courses around. And they're great. They're great. But there's still a big but, because many of these, the way companies implement these kind of programs, self-help programs or self-improvement programs in companies, the companies actually still are motivated to get the most out of you. You know? So the courses, they can help you in some way. They can help you with time management. Block off your diary, so much quality time with your family. They can help you with some things like that. They can perhaps teach you something like relaxation skills so that you're not so stressed. You know? I guess that's why mindfulness meditation has become so popular. You know, they can teach you how to begin to communicate better. So they can all be good. They can give you some skills, these kind of courses. They can inspire you for a short time. But before long, the power of these courses starts to, or the benefit from them, starts to fade away. And then the gaps start appearing in your life again. And the reason why this happened is because these courses are still operating on a pretty much superficial level. They're not getting really to the point of addressing the emotional and spiritual needs of people. It doesn't matter how many skills you learn, how many courses you do, they're not able to make a person truly happy. And that is the key. If there's not harmony inside, then it's very difficult for there to be harmony outside. And from the Buddhist perspective, we develop internal harmony by beginning to take self-responsibility. And this is really critical. Self-responsibility is a critical ingredient in order to be able to manage our lives, manage our emotions, managing our relationships with others, managing our professional life. There's many things that we meet with in our life. We can't avoid problems. There are always going to be problems. There's always going to be complaints. And it can be that our problem or our complaint is about a difficult person. Did you know that complaints indicate, I mean, you must know this, but you've probably not said the words, but complaints indicate a level of an unhappiness. So if you're complaining already, you're unhappy. Complaints indicate, from yourself or someone else complaining, indicate that you want something to be other than what it already is. Indicates that there's dissatisfaction. Complaints put the responsibility for your happiness on somebody else. Think about it. Have you ever heard of Chogyam Trungpa? He was a Tibetan Buddhist teacher in the 70s. Had quite a reputation. Pretty wild kind of Tibetan teacher. But he had some incredible wisdom. There's one fantastic book of his that was one of the first books I read called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. You know, so Trungpa was actually quite a character, but he said that complaints are the squeal of the ego having its toes stepped upon. Isn't that wonderful? You know, it's very true. So there's this association of internal happiness with the external situation. I'm unhappy because Telstra are overcharging me. Or I'm unhappy because didn't get a promotion. I don't know, whatever. I mean, you know, we're always pointing the finger outside. I'm unhappy because, even though we might not say I'm unhappy, but our feeling of unhappiness is always because of out there. So, you know, I'm not happy because I'm not making enough money, not having a promotion. This person's not behaving the way I think they should behave. There's this association between this internal unhappiness with the external situation. And then the thought is, well, if I change the external situation, then I'm going to be happy. So perhaps that's true. Sometimes when we're in an unhappy job, then changing the job, it brings some happiness. Temporarily though. If we haven't addressed the fundamental internal issues, changing these situations is still going to lead to some form of dissatisfaction. So it's not until we change our view of these situations that there will be any real lasting change in our minds. So from the Buddhist perspective, taking responsibility, taking self-responsibility, is not blaming outside for your problems. It's not expecting outside to bring you happiness, but rather committing yourself to working with your mind, you know, to take responsibility for your happiness. Whatever goes on outside, developing the kind of mind that's able to remain stable and to remain happy, whatever the situation and the events. So it's about breaking down our old habits of behaviour, where when anything happens that doesn't fit with what we want, we get upset about it. Or we go grasping after the things that we want. So we start working with our mind by accepting that, especially the people that we share our lives with, the people that we work with, that they are not responsible for your personal happiness. The company is not responsible for your happiness. The government is not responsible for your happiness. Your partner is not responsible for your happiness. Rather than thinking that all of those things are responsible for your happiness and are there to serve you, we take ourselves so seriously, you know. We take ourselves so seriously that everyone there is supposed to help us, you know. So we try to change that around, and we try to even think that maybe we're also responsible for the happiness of others. Rather than expecting them to give us the happiness, we take responsibility for developing our own happiness, and then even think, how can I be of some benefit to others? Bring them happiness. So we recognise that we're not alone, that everybody just like us wants to be happy. So managing our lives means not only accepting responsibility for our own happiness and our own suffering, and this is another key point, it's also not blocking the happiness of others. Because this is something else that we do. If I'm not happy, well, I'm going to be damn sure that you aren't either. So, you know, so often we want our own happiness, but we want to block the happiness of others. So this is the first step where also Buddhism can help, you know, to help us to work compassionately with others. When you take the responsibility of your own happiness, you take the burden off others to make you happy. And that's a big relief for them. It's a big relief when you don't have to make someone happy anymore. So they're freed from quite a big burden. Have you ever worked with someone who only seems to be happy when you're dancing to their tune? I would have to explain that comment, dancing to their tune in Holland. But you know what I mean, don't you? You know? Everybody has to do exactly what they want. And when that person leaves or they're away sick, then everyone else is happy. What a relief, you know? So when we can start to look also at the working situation, not in terms of, you know, what we gain or lose, not just in terms of, you know, how much money we earn, but when we look at it in terms of, well, what can I learn from this? How can I develop? How can I contribute? How can I make this something of mutual benefit? You know, then with that kind of attitude, we open up a bit, you know, and there's the possibility for everyone to find some level of happiness. When I was working for Arnott's, I had such a different attitude because I'd been studying Buddhism for, you know, so many years, and I needed to work because I needed to be able to support myself, purely and simply. I needed to eat. I mean, just because you're a nun doesn't mean that you can live on air. You know, so I needed to support myself. So I also thought, well, okay, they're going to pay me, so what can I do to contribute back? Okay, of course you have to do the job that you're asked to do, but I thought, how can I try and do this in a way that is mutually beneficial? How can I learn from the different situations that I find myself in with this company? So it was a little bit of a challenge. It was a little bit of a challenge because, as I mentioned, for those of you who were here on Tuesday night, sometimes there was this pressure to lie or to you know, to really screw the suppliers, you know, and get the best deal out of them, and I refused to lie, you know, and also there would be supply issues, and you know, you were told that you had to put pressure on the people. I didn't find that actually helped, putting pressure on people. And my predecessor in this company had always been she used to just scream at people and tell them that they had to do what she said or they would lose the business. And I thought, I can't be like that. So I decided that I would try to speak kindly. And it was very interesting because I still was able to get the result that would work for everybody, for my company, but also for the others, without having to resort to using bad words or being heavy or putting pressure on. And actually, they described me once as that I would have a conversation with people and they didn't realise that actually they'd been hit on the head by a sledgehammer. And I thought, I'm not sure if I really like that. But it was like, the way I spoke or tried to speak and the kind of words that I would use, it was making the point, but it wasn't being rude about it. And it's like they knew that they had to try and fix the situation. So, if we can look at how we can learn to practice patience, how we can learn to develop, good speech, how we can develop an empathy, some compassion for the way the other people, the situation that they're in, we can learn from that. And then also, the other people start to learn from you because they could see that there was another way of doing things. We had a major issue in the company that I had to manage, and I tried to do it in my kind of Buddhist sort of thinking style. And when the whole issue had been resolved, I received an award, and the award was called MAD, M-A-D. And I was awarded for making a difference. I mean, all they gave me was a piece of paper. Or maybe I got a voucher. But I don't know. The point was, I felt really happy about that. Because that's what you want to try and do. You want to try and make a positive difference. So instead of this kind of thinking, how much can I get out of this situation, how much money, how many free things and time off and stuff, how can I make a difference, by my behaviour, by my manner, by developing my mind in this. How can I give up my attachment of wanting everything my way? How can I behave much more ethically, much more compassionately? How can I try to give up my attachment and my ego? How can I try to be of benefit for others? And so when we use those kind of principles, then we find that the work actually becomes enjoyable. We find that we make a difference. And this is how we also need to be with our family. So the whole divide between work and family isn't so big anymore because there's that fundamental attitude of honesty and integrity and generosity and patience and enthusiasm, and we need concentration and we need wisdom. And for those of you who have had some Buddhist teachings before, you will know that I've just mentioned what are known as the 6 perfections. These 6 wonderful qualities that somebody with an altruistic motivation who's aspiring towards enlightenment, the full Buddhahood, the full awakening, the fulfillment of their potential, someone that, what I call a bodhisattva, that's got bodhicitta, this altruistic aspiration, they carry around these 6 perfections, these 6 qualities in their toolbox. You know how an electrician has a toolbox? And in their toolbox they've probably got wires, tools. You know? So too does a bodhisattva, someone with this great altruistic motivation. So they carry around these tools in their toolbox. So even if we are not at a point of aspiring towards fulfilling our potential for awakening, for enlightenment, for Buddhahood, even if we just want to be able to survive well in a work environment, in a family environment, then we need these qualities as well. We need to have the generosity that enables us, for example, you know, when you're working with others, sometimes you want to keep things to yourself. You don't want to share things with others. Have you noticed that? You know, because if they know as much as me, then I might lose my job. You know, but this generosity says, great, you know, if and working with us, if they can become better than me, and they're more deserving. So please, you know, happy to help, which is very different in the competitive world, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then ethics, so not lying, not being dishonest. This really helps you in business because people trust you, so that when you say, I need it at 4 o'clock this afternoon, they know that you're not playing games with them. They know you're being straight, that you're being honest. That's the time that you need it. It's not that you need it tomorrow at 4 and you're just saying it. They know that you need it now. Then we need patience, so that when people do silly things, which they do, or other people are upset, or people start blaming you or criticizing you, patience stops you from getting out of control, getting angry, getting upset about this. Then we need the enthusiasm. To be able to succeed in anything, you need enthusiasm. That you know, rather than saying, I can't handle this anymore, it's too much for me. Enthusiasm is, maybe the word is like a perseverance. You know, being able to keep going. Okay, it's a bit tough, but I just keep on going, one step at a time. You know? And then concentration. Well, to be able to do anything well, you've got to be able to focus. If your mind's all over the place, like, forget it. And then wisdom. The wisdom to know what is most skillfully to do. So we need these six qualities. We also need to do what we call finding the balance and not being under the influence of what we call the 8 worldly concerns. The 8 worldly concerns, they infiltrate our life to such an extent that many people are always unhappy. We're attached to making a profit. The Dutch are very good at that. They always want to profit, you know. We're attached to making a profit, to making money. And when we lose, oh my God, the number of suicides as a result of this financial crisis, which hasn't really affected Australia, by the way, compared to what it did overseas, you know, the number of suicides, people that dropped millions and millions and millions as a result of this financial crisis, because they'd been really investing in very risky investments because they wanted to make more money. They wanted to profit. So trying to find a balance between always wanting to profit and win and losing, trying to find the balance between that, trying to find the balance between always wanting to feel comfortable both physically and mentally, because we suffer a lot when we have to move out of our comfort zones. So trying to find the balance there. Also, what happens a lot in our work is that we get so attached to having a good reputation so that when somebody starts to criticize us or to blame us, oh, goodness me, again, we suffer incredibly. We really want the praise of others. We want, oh, they're so good. They're the best employee, you know. They're such a good worker. We want that. But we don't want anyone to show up any little problem or, you know, any little mistake that we make. So our mind's going up and down all the time because of these things. Our mind grasping for some things and having aversion for others. So, you know, when we learn to be more balanced in our mind, having internal harmony, taking self-responsibility, developing the qualities in our mind, not running after these 8 worldly concerns. With all of these things, we have more balance between our work and our family, and the whole process works for us. And when it works for us, that means we make a positive contribution for others. And that's what I wanted to try and say. It won't happen overnight. It's not like that. But it's really, really possible. And it is. And what happens when you develop these kind of skills is that your self-confidence rises. And you enjoy what you do. And you're confident in it. And if it doesn't work out, well, that doesn't matter. Because you are such a strong internal being that it doesn't matter. I saw Lindy's dear mum today. I haven't seen her in many years. And the last thing she said as I was leaving, she said, Kaye, are you happy with what you're doing? And I almost cried. And I said, yes. I've found my niche. And whether I'm the nun or not doesn't matter, because it comes down to this internal balance and happiness and self-confidence. So where I am, what I'm doing, I hope, you know, to be able to, you know, fine. Just be happy wherever. Anyway, blah blah. Any questions?
Well, you said the 6 perfections, but I've got 7. So
yeah, because I kind of put a few things together, I think.
Was it integrity and honesty, are they one? Okay?
Yeah, integrity and honesty actually make up part of ethics. Yeah. Yeah.
And about the concerns.
Yes.
Worldly concerns.
Yes.
I've got only 3.
Ah! Okay. Well, basically, they're 4 sets of 4 things and their opposites. So we're attached to winning or to making a profit, and we have aversion to losing. We're attached to comfort, and we have aversion to discomfort. You might also say pleasure and displeasure. We're attached to reputation, and we have aversion to disreputation. That's not a word, isn't it? Bad reputation. And we're attached to praise. Brain. Did you like that? That was a combination of the 2 words. That's the balance, right? So we're attached to receiving praise, and we have aversion to blame. So that's 8. And it's quite interesting to see how that works. I think most of us would be aware of the praise and the blame one. I'm having difficulty with that. See, I have difficulty with that. Yeah.
How can we detach about blame? If there is blame, we should be concerned about it.
Yeah, you know, if somebody blames us for something, then we have to look. We try not to get upset about it. Okay. What happens very often when people blame us is that we get angry. How dare you? But if we say, look at the situation and yeah, well, if you've made a mistake, you acknowledge that and you say, yeah, you're right, I made a mistake. Or If it's not accurate, then you say, no, I didn't do that. But if they still insist on it, then they're just empty words, because it's not true. So again, you don't get upset about it. You just, there's something. It's like you're being accused of something that doesn't exist, like the horns on a rabbit. I think is the example they use. Yeah. So you have the choice. This is something that is so liberating to realize, that you have the choice to decide how you will react to things. Now, often we don't give ourselves the space to be able to choose. Our habits are so ingrained that we just automatically react. Someone says something I don't like, I get angry. But we have the choice. We can decide to get angry. We can decide to accept the criticism or the blame, or not to worry about it. We've got no one can make our minds up for us. No one can decide how we should react. But what happens a lot is that we let other people decide for us. That's why we suffer.
It all goes down to the ego, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes, I mean, if you define the ego as like a self-cherishing attitude, a self-importance and a grasping at self, then yes, it's taking the self too seriously. We do that all the time. We take ourselves so seriously. So that anything that doesn't fit with this ego, this sense of self, then we get upset about.
Isn't there justifiable anger?
Is there justifiable anger? No. Huh?
Probably not the answer we wanted.
No. No. Okay. If you see how anger arises, anger arises because the mind is displeased. Why is the mind displeased? Because there's this grasping at a self and wanting things that only the self fit with what the self wants, and having aversion to anything that doesn't fit with what the self wants. So from that comes mental displeasure, and therefore there comes anger. So anger always comes from a sense of self-importance or something like that. There can be times, however, where one needs to be assertive and one needs to be clear. But one should not ever do that out of anger or out of this kind of selfish mind. There can be times when you need to be clear, to be assertive, but with a compassionate motivation. For example, where there's some injustice in the world, some form of injustice. Getting angry doesn't actually help. But using that awareness of the injustice and having compassion for those who are suffering as a result of that injustice, wishing them to be free from suffering, and then using that as a motivation to be able to perform some kind of constructive action that might help to resolve the injustice, and therefore you need to speak clearly and maybe very assertive, or take some assertive action. If that's done out of the motivation of compassion, fine. So you can still be quite strong. I often say an example: your child runs across the road, and you've got a choice of how you relate to that child running across the road. You can get angry which often happens when people get frightened about the child running across the road because of losing their child, more often than not. You're losing their child being hurt, and getting angry and saying, "Don't you run across the road," and maybe hit them. That's not so good. But if you just say, "There, dear, don't run across the road," it's not going to they're not going to learn, are they? But if your motivation, recognising that the child running across the road could cause that child suffering, and so your motivation is to stop that child from experiencing suffering, so it's really about the child, and you say, "Don't you run across the road," and you're very firm and but the motivation is not anger. So there's a different, it's different the way the words come out, the way they're said. The child, I hope, would listen. But there's also a difference to what happens in your mind, because when you're angry, that sets up this habit in the mind. It sets up, it's not so good. Anger is kind of it disturbs the mind. They sometimes call it a disturbing attitude. It disturbs the mind. Whereas compassion doesn't disturb the mind, and you can still be quite strong and effective with it.
But anger can sometimes give the person the energy to work on the habit. You're not saying that anger itself is bad, are you? You're saying more that how you respond to the emotion anger. Is that?
Anger, from the Buddhist perspective, is a disturbing attitude. It will always disturb the mind. Okay? I'm not talking about suppressing it, suffocating it like I've been using that word tonight, repressing it, but to actually see what the disadvantages are of anger, to see how it causes the mind to be unhappy. I don't know what happens to you when you're angry, but I know what happens to me. I get red in the face, I sweat under the arms, I shake, my heart pounds, and I get pain in my heart. I can't say that that's positive.
Can you say that acknowledging your anger is useful?
Oh yes.
That it's still an emotion that is going to arise, and it is important to acknowledge that this is the emotion of anger, but then it's what to do with that energy that has arisen. Absolutely.
Because I think to resolve anything, the first step is to acknowledge. So to acknowledge that anger is arising. Okay? But rather than let that anger completely overpower you and translate into your actions of your body, your speech and your mind, because when there's anger in the mind, then that can cause you to say things that maybe later you regret. It can cause you to do things, kill people even, a lot out of anger. So good to acknowledge and to do something about it before it translates into actions, before it kind of really screws up your mind, okay? And so then to be able to, transform that energy in a more positive sense is, yes, absolutely, I would agree. But it would be much better to be free from that anger altogether, because it does disturb the mind. And so, yes, in the beginning, recognize it arising, fantastic. Then you apply some antidote, maybe practicing patience, trying to meditate on compassion, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. There's all these different kind of techniques.
So there are ways to cope with anger.
Ways to cope. Yeah, there are ways to cope with anger, but they don't get rid of the anger. The anger still sort of remains there in your mind, but it will go into more of a dormant phase, but it will still be there in your mind. So we then have to look at antidotes that work even more deeply on our anger. So, for example, okay, why do I get angry? To recognize that anger is a result. It's a result. There are causes of anger. And we could say, okay, there are many causes. Somebody doing something I don't like. Fear, attachment. All of these different kind of emotions also feed into anger. But at the bottom of it all is this view of ourself that we hold on to so tightly, that we take ourselves so seriously, that we see ourselves as existing so permanently and concretely and inherently, and that is really the issue. And if we're able to uproot this mistaken, fantasized view of ourself, then we're able to actually really eliminate, eventually, the anger. Yeah? So, yeah, absolutely. First step, acknowledging, is such a good thing to do, because it helps you to develop the control to stop the anger causing any further problems. And so then, you need some antidotes at that point to stop it causing problems. But then that doesn't really resolve thoroughly the problem. It doesn't resolve the anger completely. So then you need other more effective, more deep methods to deal with it.
I think it might be helpful to sort of distinguish between wrath and anger, because there are times when a very strong response is completely appropriate to a situation. I'm thinking, as an example, as a parent, when you're wanting to stop your child in its tracks and have them respond because they're about to do something, or their behaviour is either causing harm to themselves or harm to others. So what sometimes appears to be an anger response, it's all down to the motivation, really, isn't it?
That's what I just said with that example with running across the road. He comes, and I didn't use the word wrath, because I think we need to be a little bit careful, because it's very easy for us to say
a clear distinction.
Yes, I know, but it's and it depends on the motivation. It's anger when there's the selfish motivation. It can be called wrath when there is the compassionate motivation. But it's very easy to try and mislead ourselves and say, my motivation's compassion, and it's wrath. It's wrath I'm showing, when actually it's anger. So that's why I was trying to make more of an emphasis, not on anger as a word or wrath as a word, but on the kind of what's happening, the motivation and the thinking process. But you're absolutely right, of course, yes. Wrath and anger are different.
And then there's an extraordinary photo of Mama Yeshu with the most wrathful look that I've ever seen, and it's just, that behind that is absolutely the highest motivation for our sort of benefit, but it has the effect of stopping me in my tracks every time I see it.
I had an example where with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it's the only time he's ever been really wrathful with me, and it was that I met him in a shopping area with some people, and he said hello to everybody, but not to me. And his attendant said, "Oh, Rinpoche, you remember Kaye?" And of course he remembered me, but he just ignored me. And then there was the next day, again, just ignored me. And it went on like this for 3 days. It was like he didn't know me, just completely ignored me, and then kind of, he'd look at me, look at me. And then I started to feel a little bit upset. I thought, I've given up my life. I sacrificed my life working for this guy, and he's pretending he doesn't even know my name, and I got a bit upset, and then I thought, my ego was, I had been doing all of this. I had been working so hard, so I should be recognised, and I should be thanked, and and I recognised, what bullshit, And then in the teaching, he says, and there were hundreds of people at this teaching, and then he says, if your teacher ignores you, it's not that he doesn't care for you, but there's something that you need to learn. I thought, I got the message. But that kind of, just, and it was like, It's like, he was angry with me, but actually he wasn't angry, it was just this wrath.
This is too high a standard for us lay people. okay for nuns and monks.
You think so?
Yeah, I haven't seen any lay person living the example that you're giving. Maybe nuns and monks are like that.
Well, I'd say I've seen a lot of lay people, in fact more lay people that are good examples. I certainly have met many lay people that are brilliant examples of practitioners who are working and who are practicing, and I just admire them so much. Really. Just because somebody's putting on some robes and trying to practice, I think it really comes down to the individual, and I think being monk or nun doesn't make it's the practitioner, what's in their heart. And I know some very inspiring examples.
And also, I think the points that you're making is for one's own benefit, not for the other person's benefit. I'm saying, I'm supporting what you're saying. I'm saying, just by showing anger, or not showing, feeling anger, it's self-destroying.
Yes.
So it's not really, you're not helping the other person, you're not helping yourself.
No.
So, and sometimes some people can be very angry and keep quiet, and that also can be very destructive.
Oh yes.
So, what I'm trying trying to say is, though it's not meant for, you may say that it's not meant for lay people, but it is very useful for lay people too, not just useful for monks and nuns.
Yeah, I think it's. I think this is.
It's not useful, but I said I haven't seen lay people living up to that standard. I'm not saying it is not benefiting, not challenging what you are teaching. I'm just
but what
saying.
standard? What standard are you talking? What do you mean?
Not to get angry.
Oh.
In my life, not to get angry is a very high standard. I have to work on. I have to work on it. Not only this life is not enough for me.
I don't think you're alone in that. I really don't think you're alone in that. But we just have to try. And I have to say, I shouldn't probably say this now. I won't say that. But just by us not expressing our anger, that much benefit somebody else gets. Because when we're angry, we cause harm. And so if we don't get angry, that's that much benefit. So when people think that this Buddhist idea of being of benefit to others is something, oh God, there's no way I can do that, this is too difficult. It isn't too difficult. Bring it down to practicality. The practicality, not getting angry with somebody else, brings them that much benefit. So we just try.
Do you know the work of Albert Ellis, the American psychologist? And he talks about the ABC of anger. And he says the A is the activating event, the cause. B is the belief, your belief. And C is the consequence. And he maintains there's no reason for anyone to get angry. I mean, he's not saying that you should approve of everything anybody does, but he's talking about anger. And what he's saying, it's your belief system that causes the problem. So the consequence is you blurt out things that are not constructive to anybody.
That's right. And I mean, and often we get angry because we don't have the facts. We don't know the reality of this, the fullness of the situation.
So the belief system is all entangled and messy and self-righteous and egotistical and all that, and the consequence is terrible.
I mean, the whole thing sounds terrible. Let's go back to these 6 perfections. But no, it's absolutely true. And really what the Buddhist path is about is abandoning those kind of harmful behaviors and patterns of thinking, you know, and adopting those kind of qualities and positive attitudes, positive ways of that's what the Buddhists. There's a wonderful verse that comes from the praise of Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha. And one great teacher, Kaye Senchab Rinpoche, used to always recite it at the beginning of every teaching, every session. I used to think, oh, here we go again, not this verse again. And the verse was, do not commit any non-virtuous actions, practice perfect virtue, subdue your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And every time it would go through my head. And then suddenly one day the penny dropped. What was this actually meaning, this verse? Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Okay, there's a translation. It's a bit old words, you know, etc. But basically is don't cause harm. Don't cause harm. That was this it says don't cause harm. And then practice perfect virtue. Then do positive things, positive actions, positive qualities and attitudes. Subdue your own mind. This means subduing the delusions in the mind, subduing the anger and the attachment and the ignorance. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So basically the Buddha was saying, don't cause harm, try to be of benefit, subdue your delusions. That's what Buddhism is about. And I thought when that comes down so kind of concisely, you can make it very fancy and very philosophical and very difficult, and I can't ever do this, you know, Buddhahood, forget it, it's beyond my reach. But if you bring Buddhism down to the practicality, it's just working with your mind.
Isn't it that to undermine the self, always other things will take care of themselves? Like the anger won't come up. It's all about self, it's false self.
If one is able to realize correctly how self and phenomena exist, truly exist, then that is true. There is no source, if you like, for anger and for attachment to arise, because one's directly cut. English, I can't speak English anymore. Cut through the root, the root of the problem. But that's very difficult to do. That's a very difficult realization, to realize the emptiness of an inherent concrete self. It's very difficult to realize. That's why we need to start with those kind of antidotes at a more, you could say, more obvious level, because that trains the mind, and so then gradually it works down, so that the more kind of subtle understandings become easier to realize.
Where should I? What's their sort of name? Where should I look to study it further? It means there. I remember it from years ago, but I can't recall the name. There's four opposing.
The four opponent powers.
Is that part of that? Or?
The four opponent powers are actually a way to help purify or neutralize the negative karma that you've created. So that's also one good technique. Doing some kind of remedial practice, some kind of practice like a Vajrasattva meditation or prostrations or something like that. But when we're talking about antidotes for the particular disturbing emotions, it's good to find out more clearly what those disturbing emotions are, the delusions are. And so we can find out about those in subjects such as Lorik, mind and mental factors. Lorik is the Tibetan word. We can find out about those from the Lam Rim, the more extensive Lam Rim, graduated path to enlightenment teachings. And the antidotes, I think you also find some in the Lamrim as well. And then, I think also the thought transformation teachings, Lojong teachings, because they help to identify the problems and where you might get angry, for example, and what kind of, different way of looking at it, so to apply an antidote in that way. So I think a combination of all of those things will so you've got your future mapped out for you. This is the thing about Buddhism, the more you learn, the more you find that there is to learn, and there is such a depth and a breadth and a wealth of methods and not just information, but methods that can actually really help your life and help you to help others. So I've never been bored since I met Buddhism. Never. As a kid I can remember, I'm bored, and mothers say, read a book. I don't want to read a book. Go for a walk. I don't want to go for a walk. Since I met Buddhism, never, ever, ever bored. And even if I don't have any books with me or anything, and I have to stand in a queue, India's great for this. You have to wait a long time. There's always something that you can do with your mind. Always something that you can, work on with your mind or meditate or, so it's fantastic. Fantastic. Very happy. Okay, well I think that's probably enough for this evening. So I hope that it was of some benefit, and I hope that you've got some kind of information that can kind of help make work for you. I didn't make it up, right? And so I thank you very, very much for coming. If there's something useful, then please, take it, use it. If not, don't worry about it. And for those of you who are coming this weekend, then I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Okay. Oh.
Can I just mention those coming on Saturday that we're going to do 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock, not 5 o'clock. And